Picture this. You're standing in the shadowy corridors of Richmond Palace on a bone-chilling March evening in 1603. Queen Elizabeth I has just breathed her last breath. Her most trusted advisors are gathering her belongings when suddenly Lord Cecil discovers a letter hidden behind a loose stone in the fireplace. As he unfolds the parchment with trembling hands, his face turns deathly pale. The contents are so shocking that it changes everything they thought they knew about their beloved Virgin Queen. What was written in that letter? Was it a confession of murder? Or perhaps the horrifying truth that she had been slowly poisoning herself to death for over 40 years? Welcome, my dear friends, to a story that will transport you directly into the heart of the most dangerous and glittering court in 16th century Europe. Close your eyes and imagine yourself dressed in the finest silk and velvet, walking through the marble halls of Greenwich Palace. You can smell the lavender and rosewater that perfumes the air, hear the rustle of elaborate gowns, and feel the electric tension that always surrounds royalty. Let me take you back to September 7th, 1533, when our extraordinary tale truly begins. Picture the most magnificent palace in all of England, its windows blazing with candlelight, even in daylight. Inside, courtiers, in their finest attire, are whispering behind jeweled fans and silk handkerchiefs. A baby girl has just been born, Elizabeth Tudor. But this is no ordinary royal birth, my friends. This child's very first breath has already shattered the religious fabric of Europe and set the stage for one of history's most incredible yet tragic lives. Can you feel the drama crackling in the air? Her father, the imposing King Henry VIII, a man so large he needs 4 men to help him dress, has just committed the unthinkable. He has divorced his Spanish wife, Catherine of Aragon, a woman beloved by the English people, and married the dark-eyed, quick-witted Anne Boleyn. The Pope in Rome is furious. The Holy Roman Emperor is threatening war. Catholic countries across Europe are choosing sides in what will become a religious revolution. Imagine yourself as a lady-in-waiting holding this precious baby girl in your arms. You look down at her tiny face, her bright, intelligent eyes that seem to take in everything around her, and you have no idea that this innocent child will one day rule an empire. You cannot know that her birth has just changed the course of world history forever, splitting England from Catholic Europe and creating the Church of England. But in the Tudor court, happiness is as fragile as morning mist. Picture this heartbreaking scene. It's a crisp May morning in 1536. Little Elizabeth, now barely 2.5 years old, is playing in the palace gardens with her wooden toys, completely unaware that at that very moment, her mother is walking across the cobblestones of the Tower of London to meet her death. Anne Boleyn, once the most desired and powerful woman in England, the woman who had brought a king to his knees with love, is about to lose her head to a French swordsman's blade. King Henry VIII, consumed by his obsession with producing a male heir, has convinced himself that his wife is guilty of adultery, witchcraft, and treason. The charges are almost certainly false, but in Henry's world, the king's word is law. Imagine the absolute horror of it. Not many people in this world can say their own father ordered their own mother's brutal execution. But that's exactly the nightmare that shaped Elizabeth's childhood. Just 11 days after Anne Boleyn's head rolled into the straw-filled basket, as if she had never existed at all, Henry brings home yet another new queen, the pale, gentle Jane Seymour.
Picture little Elizabeth, confused and heartbroken, watching this stranger move into her mother's rooms, wear her mother's jewelry, sit on her mother's throne. Within just 1 year, this new stepmother gives Elizabeth something that changes everything: a baby brother named Edward. This boy is no ordinary sibling. He is the precious male heir that Henry VIII had literally killed for. Growing up in such a turbulent, dangerous court, witnessing such horrifying betrayals and violence from such a tender age, Elizabeth learned lessons that would shape her entire life. She discovered that survival meant being smarter than everyone around you, stronger than steel, and more cunning than a fox. She learned that love could be deadly, that trust could kill you, and that a woman's only real power lay in her ability to remain mysterious and untouchable. Picture Elizabeth at 15, tall for her age, with her father's red gold hair and her mother's dark, intelligent eyes. She speaks fluent Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. She can discuss philosophy with Cambridge scholars and political strategy with seasoned diplomats. She's already more educated than most men in Europe, but she's also learned to hide her intelligence behind a feminine mask of charm and grace. Now fast forward and picture Elizabeth at 25, newly crowned Queen of England after the deaths of her younger brother Edward and her older half-sister Mary. Imagine yourself standing in Westminster Abbey on that cold November day in 1558, watching this young woman receive the crown that men have killed and died for. She stands there, tall and proud, her red hair gleaming like fire under her golden crown, and you can feel the power radiating from her like heat from a furnace. She's intelligent, charismatic, and breathtakingly beautiful. Kings and princes from across Europe are sending marriage proposals by the dozens. The French want her to marry their prince. The Spanish are offering their heir. Even her own brother-in-law, Philip II of Spain, has proposed marriage. But Elizabeth has learned from watching her father's marriages. She knows that for a woman, even a queen, marriage often means death. But fate, that cruel mistress, had darker plans for Elizabeth's legendary beauty. Picture her at 29, in the absolute prime of her life, ruling England with wisdom that amazes foreign ambassadors. She's created a court that rivals Versailles in its magnificence. Poets write sonnets about her beauty. Artists beg for the honor of painting her portrait. Then, in the winter of 1562, disaster strikes like lightning from a clear sky. Imagine Elizabeth waking up one morning with what seems like a simple fever. Within days, her body is covered with the telltale pustules of smallpox, a disease so deadly that it kills 1 in 3 victims and so disfiguring that survivors often wish they had died. For weeks, she hovers between life and death, while her counselors prepare for civil war, knowing that without a clear heir, England will tear itself apart. Picture Elizabeth looking in her silver mirror for the first time after her recovery. The smooth porcelain skin that had captivated kings and princes is now covered with deep, ugly scars that no amount of powder can hide. Her glorious red gold hair has fallen out in clumps, leaving her nearly bald. For a queen whose image is her greatest weapon, whose beauty is her power, this is more devastating than losing any battle. But Elizabeth Tudor is not a woman who accepts defeat. If nature has scarred her, she will create a new kind of beauty, an otherworldly, almost supernatural appearance that will make her more memorable and more powerful than any natural beauty ever could be. This is where our story takes its most sinister turn, my dear friends. Picture Elizabeth's private dressing chamber in the early morning hours. The room is lit by dozens of beeswax candles, their warm light flickering off mirrors framed in gold and silver. Her ladies-in-waiting, Lady Mary Howard, Lady Catherine Grey, and others are preparing for a daily ritual that would horrify any modern woman.
They begin by mixing a thick white paste in a silver bowl. This innocent-looking cosmetic is called Venetian ceruse, and it's the most fashionable makeup in all of Europe. Queens and noble ladies across the continent use it to achieve that coveted porcelain white complexion that symbolizes purity, nobility, and otherworldly beauty. Watch as they carefully apply this paste to Elizabeth's face and neck with soft brushes made from squirrel hair. The coverage is incredible. Every scar, every blemish disappears under the smooth white mask. But here's the terrifying secret that Elizabeth and her ladies don't understand. This innocent-looking makeup contains white lead and vinegar. Every single day for over 40 years, Elizabeth is literally painting poison directly onto her skin. Picture the lead particles seeping through her pores with every application, entering her bloodstream, slowly accumulating in her liver, her kidneys, her brain. Lead poisoning is insidious. It works slowly, silently,
destroying the body from within while the victim remains unaware of the danger. But the horror doesn't stop there. Imagine Elizabeth applying a crimson paste to her lips, a cosmetic designed to keep them soft, red, and kissable. This paste contains mercury, one of the most toxic substances known to humanity. She's applying liquid metal directly to the most sensitive part of her face, believing it will enhance her beauty. Picture her evening routine when she removes her makeup using cleansers that also contain mercury. These beauty treatments can literally corrode flesh, eating away at the skin from the outside, while the mercury penetrates deeper into her system, affecting her nervous system, her organs, her very brain. Can you imagine the absolute horror of it? Every single day, in her desperate quest to maintain her royal image and hide the scars of smallpox, Elizabeth is slowly, methodically poisoning herself. The very beauty routine that makes her legendary, that helps her maintain power in a world ruled by men, is killing her cell by cell, day by day, year by year. Let me paint you a picture of what this does to her magnificent body over the decades. Lead poisoning causes severe hair loss, and indeed Elizabeth becomes almost completely bald by her 30s, relying on elaborate red wigs made from other women's hair to maintain her image. The lead causes skin deterioration, making the smallpox scar she's trying to hide even worse, creating a vicious cycle where she needs more and more makeup to cover the damage caused by the makeup itself. Lead affects the nervous system, potentially explaining some of the more erratic, unpredictable behavior that Elizabeth displays in her later years. Sudden rages followed by periods of deep melancholy, moments of confusion that terrify her courtiers. Mercury poisoning affects every organ in the body, slowly shutting down her kidneys, her liver, her heart from the inside out. But Elizabeth's tragedy isn't just physical. It cuts far deeper into the very heart of what makes us human. Despite her title as the Virgin Queen, despite her public declarations that she is married only to England, Elizabeth's private life is filled with passion, heartbreak, and impossible choices between love and duty. Let me tell you about the great loves of her life, starting with Robert Dudley, her childhood sweetheart, and the man who will own her heart for over 20 years. Picture a young Elizabeth, barely 25, newly crowned Queen of England, trying to navigate the treacherous waters of international politics while her heart is completely captivated by a married man she's known since childhood.
Robert Dudley is everything a woman could desire. Tall, handsome, intelligent, and utterly devoted to Elizabeth. He's also already married to H0rribIe, a simple country gentlewoman who stands between him and the throne of England. Their relationship becomes the scandal that rocks Europe. Picture the whispers echoing through every royal court from Madrid to Vienna. The Queen of England spends every night with a married man. She's granted him access to her private chambers at any hour of the day or night. She's given him lands, titles, everything a husband would receive, everything except her hand in marriage. Imagine yourself as a courtier, watching Elizabeth and Dudley together. You see how her face lights up when he enters a room, how she touches his hand when she thinks no one is looking, how they dance together at court celebrations with an intimacy that makes other couples seem like strangers. The sexual tension between them is so powerful it's almost visible, crackling in the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. Then, in September 1560, something happens that will haunt Elizabeth for the rest of her life. Robert Dudley's wife, H0rribIe, is found dead at the bottom of a staircase in their country house. The circumstances are mysterious. She was alone in the house, having sent all the servants to a local fair. Her neck is broken, but there are no other injuries that would indicate a fall. Picture the absolute scandal that erupts across Europe. The rumors are devastating and persistent. The Queen and her lover murdered his wife so they could be free to marry. Elizabeth Tudor is no better than her father. She kills anyone who stands in her way. England is ruled by a murderess who would do anything for love. The political implications are terrifying. If Elizabeth marries Dudley now,
every European power will assume she was complicit in Amy's death. Her reputation, her throne, even her life could be forfeit. But if she doesn't marry him, she loses the only man she's ever truly loved. Picture Elizabeth pacing in her private chambers night after night, torn between her heart and her crown. Dudley is free now, waiting for her decision, but she knows that marrying him would destroy everything she's worked for. In the end, duty wins over love, as it always must for monarchs. She never marries Dudley, though their intimate relationship continues for years, a source of constant gossip and political tension. After Dudley's marriage breaks her heart, Elizabeth seems determined to remain alone. But in 1579, at the age of 46, she opens her heart to love one more time. Picture a young French prince arriving at the English court, Francois, Duke of Anjou, brother to King Henry III of France. He's been sent to negotiate a possible marriage alliance, but what happens next surprises everyone, including Elizabeth. Francois is 24 years old, young enough to be her son. He's short, pockmarked from smallpox, and there are whispers about his unusual personal preferences. By any objective measure, he's not a good match for the Queen of England. But something about his wit, his charm, his obvious adoration of her touches Elizabeth's lonely heart. Picture the most powerful woman in the world acting like a schoolgirl in love. She calls Francois her little frog and actually keeps a pet frog named after him. She writes him love letters that make her counselors cringe with embarrassment. When he returns to France after their first meeting, she stands on the cliffs of Dover, watching his ship disappear over the horizon, tears streaming down her painted face.
When Francois returns to England in 1581, Elizabeth takes a step that shocks her entire court. In front of hundreds of nobles and foreign ambassadors, she publicly announces that she will marry him. She even exchanges rings with him and kisses him passionately, declaring her love before the entire court. But then reality crashes down on her like a stone wall. That very night, alone in her chambers, Elizabeth faces the truth. She's nearly 50 years old, far too old to have children safely. The English people hate the idea of a French Catholic prince as their king. Her own counselors are threatening to resign rather than serve under Francois. By dawn, she has broken off the engagement, breaking her own heart to save her throne. The last great love of Elizabeth's life is perhaps the most tragic of all. Picture a dazzling young nobleman arriving at court in 1589, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex. He's only 22 years old, the same age Elizabeth was when she became queen. He's tall, handsome, brilliant, and completely fearless. He's also the stepson of her first love, Robert Dudley, which makes their relationship even more complicated and emotionally charged. The age difference is shocking. Elizabeth is 56, old enough to be her grandmother, but Essex possesses something that captivates her completely. He treats her not as an olding queen desperate for affection, but as a woman still worthy of passionate love. He writes her poetry praising her beauty. He fights duels to defend her honor. He makes her feel young and desirable again. Picture Elizabeth at 60, standing before her mirror as her ladies apply the increasingly thick layers of lead-based makeup needed to hide her aging skin. She knows she looks older, knows that the poison she paints on her face daily is slowly killing her, but Essex's love makes her feel beautiful again. Their relationship becomes intensely physical and emotional. Essex has access to her private chambers at all hours. They're seen embracing in palace corridors. When Essex secretly marries Francis Walsingham in 1590, Elizabeth's rage is so terrible that courtiers fear for their lives. But Essex is young, arrogant, and ultimately foolish. He abuses Elizabeth's love, takes advantage of her generosity, and makes increasingly dangerous political mistakes. The relationship becomes a toxic mixture of passion, jealousy, and power that will ultimately destroy them both. Picture the most heartbreaking scene in Elizabeth's entire life. September 28th,
1599 at 10 o'clock in the morning. Essex has just returned from a disastrous military campaign in Ireland where he has suffered humiliating defeats and signed an unauthorized truce that makes England look weak before the world. Instead of waiting for permission to see the Queen, he storms into Greenwich Palace, wearing his dirty riding boots, still covered with mud from his desperate journey. He pushes past bewildered servants and guards, ignores all protocol, and bursts directly into Elizabeth's private bedchamber. There, for the first and only time in her 40-year reign, a man sees Queen Elizabeth I as she truly is. Not the painted goddess of official portraits, but a frail, 66-year-old woman who has just woken up. Her face is bare of makeup, showing every scar, every wrinkle, every sign of the lead poisoning that's slowly killing her. Her scalp is completely bald under the nightcap that hides her missing hair. She looks exactly what she is, a tired, aging woman whose body is failing after decades of toxic beauty treatments. The humiliation in Elizabeth's eyes is heartbreaking. This is the woman who has never allowed anyone to see her without her carefully constructed mask of royalty. Essex has violated the most intimate boundary of her life, seeing her stripped of all illusion, all power, all beauty.
Elizabeth drives Essex out and has him arrested immediately. When he's brought to trial for his failures in Ireland, she strips him of all his offices, but eventually releases him, hoping he's learned his lesson. But Essex's arrogance knows no bounds. Picture the final act of this tragic love story. February 8th, 1601. Essex, along with several other desperate nobles, attempts to stage a coup against Elizabeth's government. They plan to seize the Tower of London and force Elizabeth to name Essex as her protector, essentially making him king in all but name. The rebellion fails within hours. Essex is captured and charged with high treason, a crime punishable by death. Now Elizabeth faces the most terrible decision of her life. She must choose between the man she loves and the country she is sworn to protect. Picture her in her private study, a death warrant spread on her desk. All she has to do is sign her name, and the man who has shared her bed, her heart, her deepest secrets will die. Her hand trembles so violently she can barely hold the quill. Every fiber of her being screams against it, but her duty to England is stronger than any personal love. With tears streaming down her painted face, dissolving the lead makeup into white streaks, she signs the warrant. The next morning, February 25th, 1601, Essex is beheaded in the Tower of London. Elizabeth watches from her window as the man she loves loses his head to the executioner's axe. After Essex's execution, Elizabeth becomes a shadow of herself. Picture her in her final years, sitting alone in darkened rooms, refusing to see visitors, crying endlessly for the lover she was forced to kill. The lead and mercury poisoning, combined with the emotional trauma of ordering Essex's death, begins to destroy her rapidly. Her ladies-in-waiting report that she talks to Essex's ghost, begging his forgiveness. She refuses to let doctors examine her, perhaps because she doesn't want to face the truth about how her beauty treatments have destroyed her body, or perhaps because she simply doesn't want to live anymore. Picture her final tragic weeks. Elizabeth, now 69 and dying, refuses to lie down because she believes that if she does, she'll never get up again. For 15 continuous hours, she stands in her chambers while her terrified ladies-in-waiting arrange cushions around her, ready to catch her when she inevitably collapses. Her body is failing completely now. Decades of lead poisoning have weakened every organ. The mercury has damaged her nervous system beyond repair. The emotional trauma has broken her spirit. On March 24th, 1603, Queen Elizabeth I finally surrenders to death at Richmond Palace, ending one of the most extraordinary reigns in English history. Now comes the moment that sends chills down my spine every time I imagine it. Picture her most trusted advisors, Lord Cecil, Lord Admiral Howard, Archbishop Whitgift, entering Elizabeth's private chambers after her death.
These are rooms where no man except doctors has been allowed for over 40 years. They're searching for her will, for important state documents, for anything that might help with the transition to the new king. The room is exactly as Elizabeth left it. Mirrors covered with black cloth, cosmetic jars still open on her dressing table, the air still heavy with the metallic smell of lead-based makeup. Then Lord Cecil notices something unusual. A loose stone in the fireplace that looks as if it's been recently moved. Behind the stone, wrapped in silk and sealed with Elizabeth's personal seal, is a letter. The handwriting is definitely Elizabeth's, but it's not addressed to anyone. With hands shaking so violently he can barely break the seal, Cecil unfolds the parchment and begins to read.
Whatever is written in that letter causes him to go completely white. He staggers backward, nearly falling into Archbishop Whitgift's arms. The other advisors gather around, reading over his shoulder, and their reactions are equally dramatic. One actually vomits. Another falls to his knees, crossing himself repeatedly. What could possibly have been written in that letter to cause such extreme reactions for men who had served Elizabeth through wars, executions, and political crises for decades? Some historians believe the letter contained a confession about her relationship with Robert Dudley, perhaps admitting that she had been involved in Amy Robsart's mysterious death, or revealing that she and Dudley had secretly married and that she wasn't truly the Virgin Queen after all. Others think it might have contained the truth about her succession, perhaps naming a different heir than James VI of Scotland, or revealing some secret about the royal bloodline that would have changed English history forever. But here's the most chilling possibility of all. What if Elizabeth had discovered the truth about her makeup and had deliberately chosen to continue poisoning herself? What if the letter contained her own analysis of how the lead and mercury were killing her, written with the cold intelligence that had made her one of the greatest monarchs in history? Imagine reading her words, "I have painted my face with poison for 40 years, knowing it would eventually kill me because England needed a queen who looked like a goddess rather than a mortal woman. I chose the crown over life itself, beauty over health, power over love. Let history judge whether the price was worth paying." The truth is, we'll never know what that letter contained because Elizabeth's advisors made sure it was destroyed immediately. Whatever secrets it held died with them, taking one of history's greatest mysteries to the grave. But Elizabeth's incredible legacy lived on. Despite the tragedy of her personal life, despite the physical agony she endured, despite the loneliness and heartbreak that marked her final years, she gave England its golden age. She transformed a small, relatively insignificant island kingdom into a major European power that would eventually rule a global empire. Perhaps that letter contained the key to understanding how she did it. How a woman with no husband, no children, no male heirs, managed to hold power for 45 years in a world completely dominated by men. Perhaps it explained how she turned her greatest weaknesses, her scars, her age, her inability to have children, into sources of mystical, almost supernatural authority. What do you think was really written in that mysterious letter? Was it a love confession that would have shocked the world, a political secret that could have changed the course of history, or simply the private thoughts of a dying woman reflecting on a life of impossible choices between love and duty, between personal happiness and national greatness? The mystery remains, but Elizabeth's story continues to inspire women everywhere who face their own impossible choices, their own struggles between authenticity and the masks society demands we wear. Her painted face, deadly though it was, became a symbol that still represents female power, intelligence, and the terrible price of greatness.